Good morning, everyone. I'm going to ring our peace bowl, and as I do, let us call in all of the fathers who worked towards peace. In recognition of the many kinds of fathering in this world, I want you to know that we are also including all those whose fathers have died, for the fathers who have adopted, for the biological dads, for those who want to be fathers but may not have had this experience, for those whose children are far away, both physical distance and emotional distance, for the fathers-in-law, for the stepdads, for the co-parents who are recreating family, for those who didn't receive the fathering they needed, for those who didn't offer the fathering that they wish that they had offered, for those fathers who have lost children, whether unborn, infants, children, youth, or adults, for the ones who are missed, for those families that don't include a dad, yet are fathering, are nurturing, who are loving and whole just as they are. For those whose wonderful and complicated relationships with parents or with children are all practicing the art of being human. For those who are grateful for the blessings of their fathers. And now, before we move into our song, I invite you to say the names, although I won't be able to hear them, but they will go through the universe of the father figures to you. Ron, Bill, Frank. In all their uniqueness, we remember our fathers. And now let us listen to a song that shows one aspect of fathering. Song for Dad by Keith Urban.
Good morning, and welcome to Granite Peak Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Prescott, Arizona. I am Rhea Batterman. I will be your worship associate today. We extend a warm welcome to all. We're so glad you were able to join us, and we hope you are in good health. We want to stay connected, so please join us for the breakout rooms after today's service. Gives times for congregants to chat in small rooms. If you are joining us for the first time, please check out our website, which would be prescottuu.org. This is the mission statement of our congregation. We are a compassionate, spiritual community that celebrates diversity, nurtures the personal and spiritual growth of all ages, shares our gifts, promotes justice for all, and serves the world we live in. We also extend a big thank you to those who contributed to the presentations to today's service. That would be Heather Knowles for her technical direction, and Mary Lou Prince for her musical direction, and also a big thank you to all the people who sent in photos of your dads. Although we are physically apart, we are still in community and continue with some of our meetings and our activities via the internet. So please check out the weekly peak, our website, or Reverend Patty's videos for announcements. We have quite a few today. We have our usual weekly Zoom meetings together with Storytelling with Patty, together with Wednesday Forum and Friday Lunch with the Minister. Also, Children's Faith Development will be held at 11:30 a.m. this morning via Zoom. Please contact Bev Bostrom for more information. Also happening this evening is Summer Solstice Celebration, which is at Watson Lake, below the Upper Gazebo. So hope to see everybody there. It would be 6:30 tonight, once again, Watson Lake, below the gazebo. Also happening today is the Father's Day pastry auction to benefit Granite Peak. You could find a link in today's order of service or also in the chat. And lastly, but importantly, the Granite Peak Pledge year is ending on June 30th. So all those who have not gotten your pledge in, please do so as quickly as possible. You can contact Mary Ann Erickson or Russ Erickson. We begin our service today in the Unitarian Universalist tradition of lighting the chalice. Today's reading is called These Are Our Dads by Amy Petrie Shaw. Today we recognize and honor all the men who have been there or tried to be there no matter what. Those who have remained calm in crisis and those who could not remain calm but did not run away. And those who did run away, but came back again, and those who never came back, but always wished it could have been different. They are our dads, rich and poor, tall or short, slender as a pole, or round as a basketball. These are the men who helped raise us. These are the men who formed us through their actions or their lack of actions. They are our dads. Birth fathers, adoptive fathers, stepfathers, and foster dads. Fathers who have no children themselves, but who step in to help raise the children of neighbors or of a friend. Grandfathers and uncles. Single moms who have had to learn to go beyond motherhood. Trans dads who have given birth. Trans dads who haven't. Queer dads, gay dads. Through love and hatred, joy and tears, addiction, mental health issues, perfect health, sickness, aging, wealth or poverty, absence and presence, they are our dads. They are because of us, and we are because of them. These are our dads. We light this chalice as a symbol of our heritage and gratitude for our beloved community. Oops. Oh, can you see this? A little different lighting, but.
Thank you, Ria. Welcome, everyone. I am feeling lifted from our time together with that beautiful Watson Lake behind us. And I am lifted by the beauty of this morning. Throughout the Unitarian Universalist world right now, energy is gathering for General Assembly. And I wonder what ideas we might get from that gathering of so many people with their hearts on justice. I'm so grateful for the connections that I feel among us, even though we are at a distance. And I'm so grateful that you kept your distance during our concert, because we will now be scheming for more such opportunities, because you worked on staying safe at that time. The sun rose again this morning. It always seems a miracle to me. And on this day, we're remembering our fathers in all the meanings of fathers and the words I gave and in what Ria said. And we're also, I know many of you, remembering children or grandfathers, and that interconnected web of ancestors who are part of who we are, who we are. Let us sing about who we are with Issei Barnwell. We are. Let us say our covenant together. Do you all know it? Well, we'll wait for the words. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community. Thus do we covenant together. And now we have a surprise because we could not let Marianne Erickson go and her marvelous work as board president without saying a big thank you. So here we're going to first hear from Russ Erickson. He has a short video, and then we'll have words from other people. Let's listen to what Russ has to say about Marianne's time here.
Marianne, I would like to take just a moment to thank you for all the good work that you've done as president of our congregation here at Granite Peak. We have worked together many times in the last few years, and I've always found that you're very thorough and very capable. You're excellent with following up on things that we're working on together, particularly recently with the payroll protection program and all the other work that we've been doing financially. You've been there all the time. But not only that, when you're leading a board meeting or when you're doing some other job that needs being done that nobody else had volunteered to do, you're always there. You've done a really big job in the last several years for Granite Peak, and you've done it very, very well. So I thank you, and I wish you a little bit more calm and peace perhaps as you leave this position and get a chance to relax. Good luck.
And here are some more words that express gratitude for the past years that Marianne Erickson has served our community. Tony Jarnigan wrote, I am sincerely grateful for your steady hand, calm presence, and proactive, diligent stewardship of our Board of Trustees business. I have learned a lot from your style of leadership and am grateful for your service to the congregation. As one of the mouthier members of the board, I appreciate you will always being willing to hear me out. I will miss you immensely on the board and hope we get other opportunities to see each other and interact, especially during our shutdown. Blessings to you. And Marianne Clark wrote, when I first met Marianne at a new member orientation, I thought she'd be a wonderful addition to the congregation and a future leader. I was right on both counts. We've been so lucky to have her steady leadership during the past 2 years and look forward to her further contributions to the congregation. Thank you, Marianne. And so many more voices are added to that, but that would make this presentation too long. So thank you, thank you. Thank you, Marianne. Yay, let's all, we can't. We're giving you a standing ovation. Kiss. Oh, and thanks to the other board members who are leaving. We are grateful to your leadership too. Thank you, Frank. And I know if I mention one, I'm going to forget people, and I'm so sorry that I will probably. Let me see, who's Frank was. Oh, and Kelsey, yes. Thank you to this leadership. And now I'm going to take you back into a different kind of time. I'm going to tell you the last part of the bear story. In the first part, I told you of the bears who were hungry on the mountain because so much rain had fallen and they couldn't find the food that they usually found that would nourish them through their winter sleep. And so they went down to the village of Lucky Field in search of a place of refuge. And they knew it would have something to do with foxes. But on the way, a farmer saw them. And he began ringing a bell and running through the village and saying, 1 bear, maybe 2 bears, no, probably 20 bears. And the villagers gathered together. And very soon those sweet lumbering bears that we know as wonderful creatures became ghosts and phantoms and monsters in the eyes of the villagers. And Mrs. Middle Mountain began dusting off the grill that she used for wild meats, and all the men were cleaning their guns and their knives. And they all gathered together and they went out to look for the bears. And about at that very moment when they were gathering, that is when the bears arrived at the place that was a large stable, an abandoned stable that was where the foxes lived. And we, the foxes, let in those bears. And we made them a delicious mushroom stew. And then we covered them with hay for their long winter sleep, so that if someone came in, they would only say, "Oh, what a large, large mountain of hay." And that is when I heard the door rattling. And Mr. Middle Mountain swaggered in and he said, "See any bears of late, Mr. Fox?" And then Mr. Chestnut sniffed. "It smells like mushrooms, the favored food of bears." I was very scared at that point because Mr. Chestnut's train conductor eyes are sharp enough to distinguish a fox track from a bear track. They are quite different. And he was squinting at the earth and stooping and saying in a low voice, "Bear or badger, one or the other, these don't look like the footprints of a fox." And then suddenly Mr. Nowtown sat down by my side, and I can tell you I have never been that close to a human in my life. And when he moved his hand slowly, I could see that he was covering the cape of a bear. He was covering a bit of that beautiful embroidered cape that was sticking out from under the straw. And a look passed between us, a look that rarely crosses species, long and hard and full of meaning. And his hand lifted, and then my paw went down. He stood up quickly, brushing himself off, and then headed straight for the door, examining the floor as he went. "They've been here," he said, "but they are gone." And he raced off into the night as if hot on their trail, and the others followed in his wake. Mr. Chestnut left last, saying, "Must be badger, but sure looks like bear, or could be bear, but bear is gone. Mr. Nowtown led them on a chase through the mountain. From far ahead he yelled, "I can see them up over the pass, a long line of them. Must be at least 10 bears." Then by the time the others got there, the bears had moved farther on out of sight. All along the ridge that leads out of the mountains to the sea they ran, singing and laughing and thinking of bears. When they reached the flower fields of the last ridge, they stopped. more by the surge of memory than the lack of bears, for this is where they had each brought their first love, and where each had spooned and kissed for the first time in the season of cherries or daffodils or wild iris or peonies. And they sat at last for a moment, lost in their memories, draining the last bits of brandy in their hip flasks, and thinking that they hadn't had so much fun in 20, 30, or 40 years. Mr. Nowtown scanned the horizon and pronounced, "They are out of our reach," and then spoke with longing as a spokesman for all, "Maybe they'll come back next year." "And if they don't," the ever-smiling Mr. Goodrice said, "we could pretend that they do." And the men spent the night on a cushion of late chrysanthemums, each with his own dreams of youth. And when they got home, they smelled of flowers, and their cheeks were pink from the cold. "We chased them away," they announced, filled with the energy of youth. And that is why, dear children, the bears were saved, and how they spent a night and the whole winter in the stable, asleep under the hay, and why you never need fear a bear or a Nowtown if you see one in the woods. And now I will ring the bell and take you into a different time, but a place of our joys and sorrows where all of us, I believe, have experienced being lost and saved over and over again. As you listen, think of this bell. Let us take a deep breath together and think of these real, very real humans all gathered here today, some of whom we saw masked at our gathering on Friday. Let us remember this humanness that we bring to our connections with one another, this humanness that touches mortality. We hold, especially at this time, Jack Stanton and his family over the recent loss of their beloved wife and mother. Let us hold all in this community who are feeling loss, whose names I do not know. We also hold the joy of Damaris and her new daughter, Alegria, who are doing very well, who are doing so well. And we hold in the light of this community, let us feel it grow out farther and farther until we encompass those in this state who are becoming ill. We are having a spike in cases in this state. Let us hold them in our light. And Lou and I have been watching the fire growing in Tucson. Let us hold the earth that is on fire also in this light. Let us hold this country with so many movements happening, movements towards justice. Let us hold them and let us have our own hearts yearn for the justice that they are calling for. Please join me. I invite you, because I do not see so many of you close together now. I invite you to say those names and And I hope on Saturdays, I forget to say this in my message, to send me the names of those you would like to have mentioned during this time. But I invite you to say those names into the silence and we will hold them. Even in this time of distancing, we are moving together. Let us sing, walking, walking with you. Walking, walking with you, walking with you is our prayer.
This is the time in our service when we normally gather for the offering. Let us embrace the feeling of connection and community that we have when we are together each week. Let us remember that this congregation and its programs are supported by your generosity, and we also give back to the greater community through our Seeds of Support program. And during the month of June, which is now, our recipient is the Greater Yavapai County Coalition. Please read about them in the order of service or the newsletter. To give during this distance time, please go to prescottuu.org. On the bottom of the left-hand side, click the word donate to contribute. The link is also available in the chat on this video. What is given in love is received in gratitude. Blessed be. Please enjoy this musical interlude.
When some of you sent in your photographs of your fathers, you couldn't resist telling me something about them. I'm going to have you guess who these fathers are, whose fathers these are. He would bring home any and all clocks that were no longer workable and let me take them apart. I loved gears and the way they worked and turned together. He made me my very own toolbox, hammer, screwdrivers, and even a soldering gun for electronics. Taught me to build a wireless broadcaster and how to interrupt a local radio station. We collected coins and made sauerkraut, moonshine, and hunky cheese. He built me a playhouse and a huge sandbox. He had his cars and trucks, and I had mine. I was not allowed to play with his cars unless he was home and told me that I could. I can't tell you how many Christmas dinners he and I sat down to eat Ma's meal covered in sawdust, projects, and power tools. Somebody else wrote, dedicated physician to the veterans, law professor, mystery man, father of 7, 2 of whom we discovered just a few years ago through ancestry DNA, a man with 2 identities, kind, unassuming, gentle, dedicated to our mom and family, a Unitarian since 1935, died about 40 years ago before we knew what questions to ask. Someone else, my dad always impressed upon me that I could do anything a man could do, which made me a woman with self-confidence. I thank and love him for that. Another wrote, this photo of my father was taken in Luxembourg in 1945. I am not even one of those twinkles in his eye yet. Another, here is my dad looking cool shortly after graduating from Teachers College. Here are the faces of the fathers of this community. Frank and Nancy Beeson's fathers are pictured in the first four. We couldn't attach names, so I just wanted you to know that's who they are. Mary Lou wants you to know that the photos were not blurry, nor were the words, and we're going to give you a link so that you can actually see who they are. This is not the end, and I wonder if this will inspire some of you who didn't send pictures to send them in, because it would be so much fun to have a link on our site to the pictures, because I wanted you to know that I was the one standing at the beach with my dad, my little chubby self standing next to him with my brother. And I'm sure all of you were thinking, that's my dad up there. We are thinking of fathers today, and as I have been considering the fathers that I have known, I thought of this past year. And when I had the honor of getting to know Sue Edwards after the death of her husband, Ken. He's a close friend of Ken Briefer's. And to prepare for the eulogy, I sat with her and I listened to talk of her husband Ken's life. As a child, he contracted polio, as did my mother, but she had a very slight case. But he was misdiagnosed at first, and his polio became very severe. He had to stay in a children's hospital, and he had to use an iron lung to breathe. He was never able to use his legs. And when he returned to his family in Oklahoma, as poor as they were with him in a body cast, they did not coddle him. Later, when he was getting to driving age, his father told him that he had to learn to drive a stick shift, which I have never been able to do. And he, without the use of his legs, learned how to drive a stick shift. He learned all about the automobile. He could take one apart and rebuild the engine. He drove all manner of cars. And when his kids were little and his wife would go out somewhere, Ken would entertain them by throwing the ball down the hall and playing with them. He taught them how to get up on the roof and do roof work. He loved to hear his children squeal with delight. And he took this fathering, the kind of fathering that his own father gave him, to work that he had at Home Depot. People would come in, and instead of being disparaging, he'd say, "You can do this project," and he would show them how to do it. He learned to use his own knowledge to empower. And that experience, my experience getting to know Ken, made me wonder if a good word for fathering would be empowering. Last year, in fact, right at this time, I was studying in Oaxaca, and one of my teachers, Jesus Sosa, told me of his grandfather, who had spent some years, a long time ago, in the United States as a migrant farm worker. And he'd returned to Oaxaca and bought land that was large enough to give portions to each of his children, meaning that all of his family lived in this complex, kind of near the center of this small town. And he had his own place that he built on that land as well. I was glad to hear a good story of migration. He told me of the Anglo owner of an apple orchard in Washington who treated his grandfather well, taught him English, and became like a friend, and was instrumental in empowering Jesus's grandfather to have the life he dreamed of in Oaxaca. The villages and towns and cities to the south of our borders are full of stories of people going north and creating wealth for their families, and of dying in those borders. But these stories, where they are able to pull themselves out of poverty, are stories that resonate through these villages. And when facing economic crises of the past years, many of them directly related to US policies, it has been natural for more and more people to migrate north at a great human cost. In November of 2007, only months after Mary Lou and I moved to our home south of Tucson, a young man, Manuel Jesus Cordoba Soberanes, from the beautiful town of Magdalena in Sonora, the father of 4 children, he began his walk northward to look for work as a bricklayer. After he had crossed the border, as he told me, by just going over it, he continued his walk north, mostly under cover of night, away from the searchlights of the Border Patrol's helicopters, in the freezing cold of the desert in November. And when he had reached a point from which he could feel that he was within reach of Tucson, he saw something strange. He saw a car overturned in a gully by the side of the road, and inside the driver's seat of that car was a young woman who was dying. And near the car sat a little boy. And he was only wearing a t-shirt and shorts. And Manuel said he looked at him without seeing. The little boy, Christopher, was in shock. And Manuel looked at the boy, and he knew. He took off his coat, he put it around the boy's shoulder, and together they sat until morning. Later, Manuel said, I looked at the boy, and I knew that if I didn't stay, he would die. And I thought of my own children, and I could not leave him. In the morning, a group of hunters came by, and they called the Border Patrol, and they were able to get an ambulance to the boy, who was taken to a hospital in Tucson. Manuel was taken back across the border by Border Patrol and had a very difficult time. And even though there was a movement then to allow him to live in the United States, this was his third count of being caught by the Border Patrol, and the US government refused. But Manuel, in that moment, he expanded his fathering to include a young Anglo boy. Manuel Jesus Córdoba Soberanes, his act of courageous fathering at great and for many of us unimaginable courage, changed my life. After waiting a year and a half to see if someone else would write about it, I wrote a play about his act of courage. And through performances, we have been trying to do the work of empowerment by funding microloans in Central America and Mexico. Mary Lou and I have underwritten, or Manuel's story has underwritten, over $160,000 of microloans to people in Central America and Mexico. Another part of this story is Christopher. His father had recently committed suicide, and because of that, his mother was in great distress, and she was driving in the desert. We can only imagine that she knew that they would not return from that journey. And yet Christopher was saved and taken to a safe place in Pittsburgh, where he had an uncle. Now in this country, and I imagine many of you watched the debates as we did, there's talk of restorative justice for Black Americans whose ancestors were enslaved and who built up this country, a country that provided bounty and privilege to some, certainly provided bounty to my ancestors who settled in Massachusetts and Maine, and then eventually came west. The work, I believe right now, the work that we do, building opportunities for our Latinx neighbors here and in Central America and Mexico, is also restorative justice. My first study in university was Latin American studies. I began that study the year that Salvador Allende was taken out of Chile, who died in Chile. And if you do not think that our work in Mexico and Central America is, or to people who are refugees from there, is restorative justice, I invite you to read An African American and Latinx History of the United States by Paul Ortiz. He's a professor of history at the University of Florida, and that book is a marvelous putting together of so many pieces of history that are dotted among the bigger history that we tell, a very important history. And I think that Manuel's act made me wonder what it takes for someone to change the trajectory of where they are going, what they want in life. Connect with the people who are there to be served, but who are often invisible. I wonder what it takes for us to stray from our trajectories. This pause has interrupted many of us in the directions we were going. And I hope that as we continue to have this pause, that we as individuals and as a community consider how we can expand our hearts as Manuel did that night, as he was thinking of his own children. I've often thought of him and that decision. It was such a dark, lonely place about 5 miles from our home. No one would have known it if he had left the boy to die. Manuel would have been able to walk to Tucson, work, send money back to his family. But he couldn't live with himself once he saw that connection between that boy and his own children. If our hearts are open, those connections are all around us. I wonder what it would take for us to see that connection between the way we love our beloved loved ones and our neighbors who are at risk. During the past months, I have been getting some ideas about what I can do as your minister, and perhaps things we could do together. Elia Ziegelbaum, a Prescott College recent graduate and community organizer who has visited our congregation many times. She's been investigating what the adoption of 287G, I wonder how many of you know about 287G, and what that has meant to the greater community. This Section 287G program allows certain state and local law enforcement agencies to engage in federal immigration enforcement activities. In other words, they connect with ICE. This is what the ACLU says. They are strongly opposed to the 287G program, believing it has led to illegal racial profiling and civil rights abuses, while diverting scarce resources from traditional local law enforcement functions and distorting immigration enforcement priorities. The Yavapai Sheriff's Office participation in this program has spread fear throughout the Latinx community in this county. We have lots of work to do in changing this reality. When the voices are calling for defunding the police, for destructuring, for changing things, I believe that this is one of the things that we as a community need to be involved in changing. I have begun work in establishing relationships with fellow clergy so that we can have a voice with the sheriff's office. This is work that I did in Utah. And sometimes clergy showing up with their collars makes people act differently. And I love to be that person. I also dream of listening to the needs of our neighbors. Many of them, some of them come to the Link breakfast. I wonder if we listen to them. What are the needs? Is it to have English classes? we could have those in our newly refreshed building. I also dream of you joining me in supporting people in Central America and Mexico through microlending, which is at the root of the migration of people that is causing so much suffering. I have a whole group of Spanish teachers, and I cannot study from each one of them, but I can introduce them to you. They are living in Oaxaca, which has been one of the hardest hit states of Mexico, and why the people crossing the Arizona-Mexican border have often been given the nickname of Oaxacans. My friend Jesus Sosa, who sometimes texts me, he has a dream of an after-school program. He's the one whose grandfather was a migrant farm worker in Washington. And he has a dream not of coming to El Norte, but of having an after-school program in his town that is just outside the city of Oaxaca, where children can learn on computers. He has the place, but he needs the computers and other learning materials. And I'm dreaming up a performance that might support that dream. This last week, I felt hope when Damaris texted me. She's the one who did the loteria at the Link breakfast. She asked me to pray for the safe delivery of her daughter, Alegria. And I did, and I brought them to you, and we have held them in our community. We have much to build on, and together we have already done much. Ren started a scholarship at Yavapai College that is open to people who are not documented. What if we could have 10 scholarships, or 20 or 30? And I wonder what of the skills of this community are needed. We will be listening. So don't get ideas yet. We want to respond to the ideas that come out of our neighbors. And Ren and I will be working on finding ways to listen for those ideas. In our community, I dream of a sanctuary that becomes a place that has sound that is so good that we are one of those venues for creative events that raises funds for justice, that could do a big performance for Jesus Sosa and his school. I believe, as in many other times in history, but especially now for us, we need to be flexible and nimble. We need to spend this time to rethink and envision. The world is changing quickly. Do you feel it too? Sometimes it almost takes my breath away. It is as if taking this pause has made me realize the velocity of change. More and more people are going to be out of work simply because of automation, having to shift the trajectories they had for their lives and find new ways to survive. It takes great courage to stop, to look around, to listen, and to empower ourselves and the people around us. May we be involved in the best kind of fathering, like Ken Edwards' father, whose confidence that someone living in a wheelchair could do anything he wanted to do. And his son carried that great gift and passed his courage to others through empowering them. This is the energy we need for the new world that is unfolding. My own father embodied courage in the way he spoke from his heart. He was known for his tears. He spoke from his heart and mind, and he was not afraid of his tears, even though he was a university professor. He said often what no one wanted to hear, and he also burst into song almost anywhere. And he sang with a mariachi combo during my childhood, always ready to bring out his guitar and serenade the world. For him, for his courage, for the courage of all of those who fathered and empowered us, let us sing with Joan Baez, De Colores. During that time, I hope that you envision those who have empowered you to be more of who you are. This is the gift we bring to the world. Amen, and may it be so. Together, let us remember our gratitude for all those who empowered us, who brought us to this place. May we be a community that empowers others through listening and acting. This is the key to the work of justice. May we have the courage to change the trajectory of our lives as Manuel Jesus Córdoba Soberanes. May we find ways to listen to the voices of all of our neighbors. Let us give gratitude to those who calmed our hearts when we were afraid, and rid the house of the spider or snake, those who see strangers as their beloveds, those who have seen beloveds in our beloveds when they were strangers. May we be the voices that can make things all right. May you right now in this time be safe. May you know that you are loved, that you have a community that will support you through everything, whatever you fear. I invite you to dance and find joy in this song written by Bob Marley, who in the face of so much political unrest in Jamaica and a failed assassination attempt, had the courage to tell the world, everything's gonna be all right. Everything's gonna be all right. Amen. And I want to thank you all for the guesses that you had about what was swarming outside the window last night. My favorite of which were hummingbirds. So that's what I imagined in the darkness, was that I had a swarm of hummingbirds, but they sounded a lot like bees. So I invite us now, let us extinguish our chalice together with words, and then you get to go into your groups together and talk. And I invite you to tell some stories of those who have fathered and empowered you. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And I will see those of you who are going to the solstice will be there tonight, singing along and maybe ringing a bell. I don't have a drum. Love to you all. Bye.